Hey, everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod BBQ podcast. On this episode, we have one of my favorite people in the universe, my co-driver for Road to Improvement that we filmed last year in our big green Chevy Suburban, an all-around wonderful person, an insane car human being, Elana Scherr. Elana, how are you doing? Oh, and before I forget, senior features editor of Car and Driver. I mean, just kicking ass and taking names. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I, was road tripping all of yesterday and car partying all the week before, as you know, because we hung out there. And everything is really, it couldn't be any better.
That's what we love to hear. Now, before we get into it, we're going to talk a little bit on this episode of a bunch of stuff, including Pebble Beach, the new Charger EV. Car and Driver just did a massive EV comparison that we're going to touch on, as well as what Elana has in the garage. But leading up to Pebble Beach Car Week, which was this past week, Elana got to drive up something pretty special from Los Angeles. What did you pilot up? What style machine did you pilot up to Car Week that you were pimping in?
So Mercedes has this, has a classic center. In fact, a lot of the new car companies, maybe not a lot, several of the new car companies have kind of like a heritage program now where they have a shop and they will work with people who are restoring usually like very important examples of their models. So Mercedes has a classic center that is in Los Angeles, and they invited me down to check it out. And it is mostly like gull-wing Mercedes.
Right.
Which, like, weirdly, they did not offer me for the drive up to.
What?
I don't know. Maybe next year.
That's ridiculous.
But they did let me drive a 1980 380 SL. And I mean, anybody who's listening who's not a Mercedes person, if you just picture like the most Palm Springsy convertible Mercedes, like little two-door, like just a total rectangle of a car, but like in a good way. Great lines, looks good with the top down, and it was really just a fun car to get into. We sort of caravan, so there were several classic models and a bunch of the new SL. They just brought out a new SL as well, which is gorgeous but much more performance-y than 1980. And so everyone was like swapping around, and they kept being like, Elana, do you want to swap? And I was like, nope, me and my little red Bert here are having a wonderful time, and I'm not moving. I have the seat set how I like it. Everything is good. Has like this really crazy complicated air conditioning that was working. That is like a 7-step process to like get it running. And I really enjoyed it. And you will relate to this as a fellow Trans Am fan. It's in Knight Rider. The boss in Knight Rider, Devin, in the first season, he drove a red 380 SL, an 81 that looked exactly like this one. And I do have to feel, because right now there is someone who was watching this right now and they're like, Elana, we did not get the SL in 1980 in the States. And you're wrong. And that's true. That's true. You're right out there. But this car that Mercedes has was their emissions test car in Michigan. Really? So it came to the States in 1980. So I believe the engine that's in it is like serial number 0001 of
oh my God.
So, and it's very cool. It has like a little plaque that talks, like, because it was their test car. And it has like, there are some components on it, the original components that still have like someone's handwritten like grease pencil for the testing. They would just swap out all the emissions equipment on the engine every year to kind of bring it up to date so that they didn't have to test on a new car every year. So a little bit of history there, and I really enjoyed it. It was
what was it like to drive?
It was interesting because it's not a particularly quick car. I think it's 155 horsepower or something. So it was, and it was an automatic. So it was very much about kind of maintaining a momentum to keep up with everyone else, because most of the other cars were much faster. So, if there was a straightaway, I'd be like, hi guys, see you at the end of it. And it's not exactly like a hardcore handler either. So it wasn't like Miata style where I'm like, well, I'll just catch you in the curves. I just kind of had to maintain basically mostly floored. But it's kind of fun to drive a car where you can drive it mostly floored. And then you really didn't have to brake that often, you know, because it would slow down pretty easily.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like you're mostly floored and then you just let up for corners.
Okay.
It felt like good practice. I feel like I got, you know, I enjoyed it a lot.
Good. So you got to pilot something that's iconic. And I mean, the cool part about those SLs, if you're kind of a child of the 80s like I am, you've got like you said, Knight Rider, Heart to Heart. I feel like Falcon Crest and Dallas and all those kind of really pomp shows from back in the day, all of them had an SL Mercedes that were cruising around it. Even when you watch even the fast guy shows like Hardcastle and McCormick or Simon and Simon or Magnum PI, like the rich villain always drove around in an SL Mercedes.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not quite as villainous a car as like an M5 BMW from the same general time period.
Yeah.
Like it isn't for sure the bad guy's car, but it's sort of like the rich guy's car. Like if you wanted to make sure that someone knew that this character was extremely wealthy, but also businessy, they had an SL.
So all right, so now you drove the 80s rich person car up to what can be described as the richest automotive event probably in the country, bar none, I think.
Yeah, I think some people had some money there.
Yeah. So what did you think about Pebble Beach this year? What were your takeaways? Because for me, it seemed to be at least 50% more crowded than last year.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. How many years have you been going?
I have gone every single year since 2011.
It's about the same. I think my first year was maybe 2012 or 2013. Well, I mean, it was like last year, like every car event, it was sort of like toes back in the water, like again. There were a lot. There were fewer cars that had been shipped over because there were still a lot of countries that weren't shipping and everything was super delayed. I remember talking to Bruce Canepa about event stuff and him just being like, yeah, it takes 6 times as long to ship anything and there's no availability. So like a lot of the car shows during that time period had, it would be more local cars or cars that could come via land transport. This year was overwhelming, honestly. It was I couldn't even do everything. I couldn't even do half of everything. I mean, you and I saw each other for like 10 minutes.
20 minutes, half hour. Yeah, tops.
Yeah.
And that was at the racetrack. That was at the races on Saturday at Laguna Seca.
Yeah. And then they did a really cool thing this year where they did a hill climb on Sunday at Laguna Seca, but the concourse is also Sunday. So I didn't get to go to that, but it looked awesome. I'm like, well, maybe I won't go to the concourse. But then if I don't go to the concourse, then you miss seeing like super cool stuff there. They had like,
well, it's interesting. Like I went to some of the events, and there are so many events out there. And I'll preface this by saying anybody who's ever even thought about going to Car Week at Pebble Beach, put it on your bucket list and absolutely do it. It is unbelievably worthwhile. But I was fortunate enough, I got to go to the Quail this year. And the Quail is like, I'm not a Quail person. I mean, you all have to do is look at my face and look at what I look. This doesn't belong at Quail. However, it was really cool. There was some really, really beautiful stuff there. All the high-end manufacturers like the Paganis and Bugattis and they all have their concept cars there and everything else. And it really is kind of a little peek into the future. It's almost like what big car shows used to do when they had concept cars, right, at car shows. Now I feel like it's at the lawn at the Quail, and that's where the concepts are. So it seemed like this year at the Quail, it was like is where everybody wanted to unveil their concept cars, and it was like it seemed like the Quail is now the place as opposed to like the big auto shows of yesteryear. Now everybody wants to go to the Quail unveil. So what'd you think of that?
I think you're totally right. I mean, I feel like when I've gone to auto shows, which again, I haven't really done recently for obvious reasons, but that's more, new SUVs and stuff and not the kind of things that you see in photos from like the 60s where it's just like this like wedge with like one seat and like a rocket engine in the back. And they're like, this is going to be the car we bring out next year.
Right. Right.
So, but yeah, Quail's really fun. And the combination of sort of these fantasy, special edition cars, like, oh, here's a McLaren that we're making 25 of. It's a brand new car. You can't buy it because people who knew about it before you already
bought it. Yeah.
But you can kind of fantasize about it. And then, out here in the show field, here is a Ford OSI. Did you know about a Ford OSI? No? Now you do. It's like from the 60s and it's Italian or whatever. Like,
yeah.
I think that stuff is super interesting. I always go away with a list of stuff to research every time I do Car Week. That's my assignment to myself, even if it's not for a story or something that I need to do for Car and Driver. It's like, come away with, 1 to 2 cars that you've never heard of before and research them, because it's always just a delicious rabbit hole.
Yeah, it totally. Well, it was interesting, going to Quail and seeing all the new cars, and like, again, you've got like the new Hennessy, you have the Bugattis and the Pagannis and all this stuff, and stuff like that is just, it's so unobtainable for the normal person, right? Like, I'll never look at that stuff because I can't. But I always gravitate to the old stuff. Like I think I'm just really starting to appreciate more and more classic Ferraris and classic Mercedes and classic BMWs and really just classic everything that's European, because of the shapes, because of the I mean, attainability would be the wrong word because they're still way out of my league. But I guess just the fact that I know how they work. Right, the new cars with the hybrid systems and the EVs and the turbo, I have no idea how that works. It's all black magic as far as I'm concerned. But like, there was an old BMW Roadster there that was just, it was stunning. And the old classic Ferraris, and I don't know, I look at those cars now and I'm like, man, if I ever hit anything, I have to buy something classic European. I just think they're stunning.
What do you fit in? Because one of the things that I think is very funny about fantasizing about, especially like the earlier Ferraris, is like, I'll be walking around with somebody and they'll be like, oh yeah, I love this Lotus, or I love this Fiat, and I'll be like, you would look like a circus bear in that car. Like, are you gonna remove the roof? What are you gonna do?
Well, some of them, like our old 79 BMW, I fit in that pretty well.
Germans were big.
But I know I filmed a 1960, I think I want to say it was a 63 Ferrari 250 GTE with a 383 in it years ago. But the interior was stock and I fit fine. So I feel like if it was a sedan, I'll fit okay. Coupes, not so much. I'm just too gangly to get my big legs and everything, and that just doesn't work well. But the fantasy is very much alive. Like, my favorite car of all time is a Lamborghini Miura, and I know physically I can't drive it, and it is a bit disheartening. But then it comes back to reality. It's like, well, you're never gonna buy one, so like, just fantasize about the stupid thing. That's totally fine.
I mean, I would fit in one. So if you do want to buy one, and I'm
just have you drive me around, drive me to the roof.
Just drive you around in it. I mean, one thing that is interesting on that topic, I mean, maybe not quite so much with a Miura, but maybe, I'm actually surprised no one's done it yet, is did you see how many sort of resto mods and tuner cars there were there, where people are taking not just like kind of traditional resto mod where they're taking a stock classic body and then putting modern running gear in it, but actually redoing bodies. There was a Volvo with a carbon fiber body. I think there's a Honda with a carbon fiber body. Our buddy Ralph over at Stellantis has that Charger carbon fiber body. And when they do that, when they completely redo the chassis and the body, they can truly adjust where seating is. So there is this possibility in the future. And I mean, honestly, it would probably cost less than a real one, that you could have a carbon fiber mirror that was, just, has a gurney bubble in it.
I would adore that. I mean, I think it's so much of the style. That's the other cool part about Pebble Beach is, you drive around and literally the entire week is a car show. And you could go to 7-Eleven and something exotic or something old and classic could pull up next to you. And it's just the way that one kind of week is. But it's the more owners that I talked to, and I did talk to a few, like we went to a works reunion, which was the Porsche reunion. And there were so many guys at men and women out there that drove their cars. And that's what I love. They're not trailing. I feel like people are starting to realize, like, we got to drive these things. We have to get them out on the road.
Yeah, well, especially the slightly newer, and then of course the new supercars and stuff. I'm meeting a lot more people who are actually driving those. At the works, did you see the Galpin like semi safari 80s 911, the like bright green stripes, the Targa?
Yep.
That's another thing that I'm excited to see, is people being like a little bit less, I don't know if respectful is the right word, but less uptight in their own restorations.
Yeah. And I think that's great. I mean, we were talking about this as well. I went to the auction at RM Sotheby's, and like one of the Ferraris. I wanted to buy everything. My God. So I did almost bid on a car.
What?
Yeah, and then I didn't. It was an 83 or it was either an 81 or an 83 Ferrari 400i. And it's Ferrari's sedan. It's not a sedan, it's a coupe. If anybody has ever seen the movie Rain Man, it's what Tom Cruise drives in the beginning of the movie. It's been an unloved Ferrari for forever, but it's V12. You can either get it in a manual or it had a turbo 400, transmission underneath it. And I just think they're just classically beautiful. I absolutely adore that car. And I was like, well, I have to sell at least 3 cars in order to afford this car. And then it went up and it went way past whatever I thought it was going to be. It was like definitely the most expensive one ever sold. And I was like, well, shit, that's not going to work. But what I thought of at those auctions, do you think that, like, I would love to see at auction like a 200,000 mile Ferrari or 100,000 mile classic Ferrari? Because I honestly feel that from a price standpoint, it would probably go for almost as much as the ones with 1,300 miles or whatever ridiculousness they have on them.
Well, I mean, you and I have talked about this before. My theory that like low mileage cars make me sad.
Yeah, totally.
Like, oh, this car never did anything.
Right.
Having fun. It's like a person in a Victorian novel who never left like the upstairs room and just like watched everybody through their window. And there's a freedom to a high mileage car too, right? I mean, like, stuff is going to require maintenance, but it's going to require maintenance on a low mileage car too, because entropy comes for you whether you are moving or standing still. So
that's right.
Like, maybe it looks better in a museum because everything is original, but like if you do get a low miles car where everything is original, the second that you sit in that 60-year-old leather, it's gonna take like 2 weeks before it looks like a high mileage car seat, right? Because it's just gonna go like crack, 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 crack,
right?
And like any switch that you touch is gonna be all corroded or whatever. I understand why people like low mileage cars, and they're incredibly important to restoration, because it's the only way that you can ever know what something should have looked like. But really, I feel like we only need like 2 of everything.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And everything
with that.
else should just be like, let's just go for it, because once it's been replaced once, you can just keep going. That's why I like the idea of buying race cars, because it's like, oh, well, this body is like 6 bodies down the line, because I mean,
right.
Crashed into,
I totally agree with that. Well, speaking of buying cars, I know that you got a Nova that you're playing with right now that you bought, right? So tell us a little bit about that, because I know you bought it and I was like, what the hell is she doing with this Nova? And it's turning out to be a really slick car. So what are you working on right now?
So if I was going to give other people any advice about car buying, I would say, don't buy someone else's blown apart project. Don't do that. That's a bad idea. And then, Tom's nephew had this Nova. He bought it like 10 years ago. It was a 70 SS 4-speed, took it all apart, bought a bunch of parts for it, lost interest, was willing to sell it to us. And of course, we didn't take our own advice. We were like, great, he's got all the parts, we'll buy it. It'll be great.
Yeah.
And of course, it's like way more work than we expected, but it has been kind of fun because since it's not a car that I was looking for particularly. It's not a car that I have like deep emotional connections to in any way, or like any sort of historical sense of obligation to. So we're just like, oh, well, what would be a nice color for it? It was originally red, and sorry, GM designers, but your 1970 red is balls. It's not good. So we're like, we're not going to do that. We're like, well, should we do orange? Should we do a stripe? And then we're kind of looking at colors together. We're like, oh, there's this kind of nice burgundy that they had that time period. So, we talked to the painter. He's like, well, here's some samples. Does this look good? And we're like, this one's nice. It's like, we're not worried about it being exactly right. It's gorgeous. The color turned out so good. It's like a kind of deep burgundy with a little metallic. Black cherry metallic is what it's sort of based off of. So we get the car painted and we're putting it together. We're like everybody right now, we're kind of at the mercy of back orders. So it's like a part will come in, but not the gasket for that part, and then finally the gasket for that part, and it's like, where did I put that part? But we're getting stuff done, and like I said, it's sort of been fun because it's a really simple car. Parts are available, information's available. I do have a funny story though about information and the internet. 70 SS hood has these big trim pieces on the top. They look like almost like flathead valve covers. Like they're big, they're big, they're silver, they're heavy. They look really cool. They sit in a bezel, and so we get those, and they have, so it's like an inner piece, a bezel, and a gasket. And I'm like, well, where does this gasket go? Does it go between the bezel and the paint, which like in my head seems like where
makes sense?
Or does it go between the inner piece and the bezel, which probably would keep it from rattling and would also prevent water from going in? So, fire up the old computer and
hit
say,
the Googles.
Where does the gasket go on a 70 SS hood insert? Bunch of questions pop up. First answer, between the paint and the bezel. I'm like, sweet. Scroll down just a little bit more, always get a second opinion. Between the insert and the bezel. We're like, okay. Like, and so everything is like, they're like split. The internet is completely 50-50 on where this goes. So we realized that we actually do have the build book for a Nova. Pull out the book. It's all old, water spotted, like kind of has that smell, like a old book.
Little moldy.
Like flipping through, exploded diagram. There it is. Goes between the insert and the bezel. So it was kind of funny because it was like, even though the internet is this incredible resource for figuring out how to put things together and how to do tasks, the best thing still is to just get your owner's manual and and work with that, because it was for the most part written when the car was new and has less of a chance of being wrong, but it's sort of a funny thing.
Well, that's what my dad always used to say anytime I had a question. He's like, RFTM. You know what I mean? You know what that means, right?
I don't.
Oh, RFTM? Read the fucking manual?
Oh, no. Yeah, that's good. My mom used to, when I would be like, how do you spell this? She'd be like, well, look it up in the dictionary. I'd be like, well, I can't find it because I don't know how to spell it. Which honestly is sometimes the same for manuals too. Like you have to know what they might have called something in order to find it. Right.
Well, I think, it's funny. I mean, there's so much stuff now. Like if you get the original owner's manuals or the original build books for these cars, the information in there is just, it's really everything that you need, because I feel like people took so much time to really include everything that the owner slash mechanic slash restorer might need, you know, down the line. But you guys are also filming this for your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, we've been doing updates on it, and we're a little slow as always, but
well, that's okay.
We're working on it. You can see the color.
What's the name of your YouTube channel so everybody knows?
Oh, Challenge Her.
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah, same as Instagram. So there you go.
Okay.
When we set it up, I was like, Tom, do you want to change it? You know, call it like Challenge Them or just something totally different. He's like, no, I don't care. And then now that it has like a bunch of followers and stuff, he's like, well, we probably should have. I'm like, well, you know.
Yeah, I told you. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
So, all right. So now let's go into a little modern stuff. So Dodge just came out, and you've got Dodges, I've got Dodges. They just came out with their new Charger EV concept, right?
Right. Daytona, right? Isn't that what it's called? Daytona Charger.
Dodge Daytona Charger. No, Dodge Charger Daytona Banshee.
Banshee.
A lot of words.
That's a lot, yeah.
A lot of words. Give me your initial impressions, first thoughts on this thing.
So it looks really cool. Like I think exterior looks great. You know, it's got like a 68 Charger thing going on. I think it actually has like a nicer stance than the current Charger does. It's sort of like lower and leaner looking. It's interesting because it's sort of a popular shape all of a sudden, this kind of big sedan thing. The EVs are so big. Yeah, so I think that looks cool. I mean, they did this whole big press event. Did you go to it? You saw it live?
Yeah.
So I didn't see it live. I've only seen the videos. It makes a bunch of noise. That's like a big thing for it. And then it has gearing of some sort, which I feel strange about. But
well, so does the Porsche Taycan.
Yeah, but you don't shift it. It just has one.
Yeah, but it has like a synthetic gear where it's, you know, it does shift. It absolutely does shift.
I mean, it's the Taycan and also the Audi, they have a 2-speed transmission, but it's really it's like pretty high up in the. It's not like hot roddy feeling. It's
right.
It's there for like, I don't know, speed runs or something. It's probably to make up for something else. But this apparently is like so that you could have the experience of shifting. So I don't know how I feel about that. We can come back to it. Overall, I mean, I think it's good that Dodge is doing this. You know, it's important to be there. Otherwise you're going to be an also ran. And as far as I can tell, it's kind of the first of the big three to do an electric muscle car. I mean, obviously, you know, both GM and Ford are ahead of them on the truck stuff, and Ford has that Mustang Mach E, but it's not a pony car, you know. Right. So like, this is good. This is a good move because, you know, what are they going to let like Lucid and Tesla have the like drag racing crowns? Like, they should not, you know, where that is. I mean, I guess it's not un-American because they're American companies, but you know, should be one of the Detroiters that rules the strip always, I think. Yeah.
Well, it was interesting. It's got these different drive modes. Like it has a mode called Slam mode, which I think is great. Which I can only assume is you hit the button, it's going to slam you back into the seat harder than anything else, right? It has a drift mode. I like this. It's got a push to pass feature, which I can only assume is almost like a KERS button in the Formula One cars. The sound, when I heard it, it sounds, you know, it's interesting because you knew it wasn't going to sound like a Hellcat, right? And like I posted something online and people just crucified me. They were like, Musto, you sold out and all blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, how do you sell out if you've got like 4 Mopars in the garage and like you're commenting on something that is a company trying to move forward? Like, is the sound for everyone? I don't know. I think it sounds pretty cool. Like, I feel like if Ridley Scott made an Aliens movie and they drove an EV on whatever planet they were on, it would probably sound the way that this Dodge Charger sounds.
Well, and one of the things I do appreciate, correct me if I'm wrong, because like I said, I didn't get to actually see it, is it is a real sound. Like it is a sound that is being made by
Yes.
moving through pipes rather than speakers.
Mhm.
And so that I'm cool with that. You know, because I mean, so one of the things that we do have to figure out with EVs is, yeah, what should they sound like? And you know, both for reasons of safety and for reasons of excitement.
Yeah.
You know, I've been driving a lot of EVs recently. You know, you and I, we both come. I mean,
Yeah, we're going to talk
I
about
was
that.
barely won over to fuel injection, and now here I am testing electric cars. And I understand why, you know, so many of our compatriots are like, we hate this, you're shoving it down our throats. At Car and Driver, so we just did EV of the Year testing,
Yep.
which was kind of incredible because I think last year, you know, we had like, I don't know, a few cars in our regular 10 best testing. And this year there were like 25 cars.
Were there real all EVs?
Like, yeah, all EVs. And
Wow.
there were more by the time we had finished the story.
Yeah.
So, and they were kind of all over the place. They weren't all economy cars and they weren't all super high-end luxury cars. I mean, there's crazy stuff like the Hummer and Lightning, and then there's stuff that's really subtle like the BMW. And there are many things that still don't thrill me about EVs the way that, like, you know, a Hellcat or you know, a McLaren or something is gonna thrill me. But you know, if you right now were like, all right, Elana, you don't have any of your other cars and your choice is between a gas powered SUV in the mid performance range and a 1,030 horsepower Lucid sedan.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Do you really think I'm going to go gas? Like, come on.
Right.
No, like what, to me, it's like, and what is it that you liked about this in the first place, right? Like, I think people, they start to focus on the symbolism of stuff. And I like it because it's like, what do I like about, or what was it that drew me to a loud gasoline car? A loud gasoline car was the fast gasoline car, right? You know, like the reason it makes a lot of noise is because it has to, because they can't quiet it down, because then they would choke off the airflow and then it wouldn't be fast.
Sure.
So, you know, that's, I like the connection between what something looks like and sounds like and feels like and what it's actually physically doing. So,
yeah,
you know, so I don't, so going back to like Dodge's transmission, I'm iffy on it because I'm like, do you need it? Or are we playing pretend here? Is this like shifter cosplay? Not into it. Like, let's just accept what it is that an EV does really well and like get excited about that. But sound is something that does have to get worked out because it's not safe to have a silent car.
No, I agree. And you know, it's interesting. We're having a conversation where there are certain cars, like I don't mind it. Say if you're, you know, we talked about kind of resto mods at the Quail and stuff like that. I don't mind a lot of older cars being resto modded into EVs, right? Like if you were to tell me I'm going to build a 58 Eldorado and put an EV drivetrain in it, I'm down with that. That's fine, because it wasn't like the engine in that thing was the heart and soul of that car. It was more the elegance and the style and the driving experience. It wasn't the speed. Whereby if you tell me, well, I'm going to take, you know, I'm going to take a Hemi Cuda and make that into an EV. No, I got a problem with that. But, yeah, that's a big problem. You know, yeah, you know, economy EVs, I think, are absolutely wonderful. Teslas, Lucids are just absolutely spectacular. And I think for, you know, that type of audience, that kind of luxury audience that wants that kind of quietness, I think that's fine. When you're trying to bridge the gap between performance and theater, I think that's a big thing, right? So if you're coming out of, say, a Hellcat or something like that, the whole point of that car is just theater. It's loud, it's obnoxious, it makes the superchargers addictive, right? So how do you convert those drivers into EVs, right? And the look of that, of the new Dodge EV, the concept, I feel like it's kind of a cross between the 99 concept car, the hydrogen powered car, I don't remember that one, and a little 68, 69 Charger, right, from the body lines. But I personally, like, I looked at that car and I was like, oh, I would buy that. because and if it does what I think it's going to do, it'll bridge that gap for me, where the muscle car guy goes into an EV, but the sensory aspect of it is still all there. I'm not losing anything. I'm just not putting gas in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that it's really important to have those bridges for sure. And then what's been surprising to me when I've been driving EVs is the ones that actually have kind of won me over the most, or the ones where I would be like, well, if I'm going EV, then this would make sense, have been kind of they're fast, small SUVs, which is not normally my area of affection. But the car that won for us, the Ioniq 5, have you seen that one?
I love it. I think
it's so cute.
Awesome.
It's like a hatchback, looks like all 80s. It's super
It looks
futuristic.
It looks so good.
It feels like a car that would win over young people while also having like this retro appeal to older people.
Yes.
It's super comfortable. It just felt like I could imagine being in college, and driving around with like a bunch of friends in one of those and being like, like hip and comfortable and relatively affordable. So like, I understood, I was happy that it won. I understood why, because everybody liked it. And they're so quick compared to the equivalent gas version,
Totally.
Like, there's nothing about like a single turbo 4-cylinder, like economy gas engine that is delightful. So you are not losing anything in that situation.
That is very true. Right. Well, that it was very interesting. We saw one at a light the other day, and we were just sat back and looked at it. It is so refreshing that companies like Hyundai and Kia are coming out with these beautifully styled EVs, right? Because I think you're 100% dead on. I think that younger people look at these things and the styling is just beautiful. But it's fun, it's exciting, they like the idea of the speed that comes along with it, of which there's quite a bit. But yeah, man, I would drive that. Like I would drive that in a heartbeat. I wouldn't even blink at it. So was that what were your other runner-ups in the combo? Because like when you review EVs, how do you review an EV? Like what are your parameters? Are you doing it by segment? That's got to be hard.
It's actually like a fascinating process because, you would think like, oh, is there like a list but there really aren't runners up. Like we don't do it. Like it's sort of like there's a winner and then there's everybody else and how we felt about them. And it's based on all these different parameters based on like testing. So there's performance numbers and then like everybody drives everything and does like kind of their own ratings on it. So, and then it kind of gets, I don't know, they've got a secret formula. I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you what runners up were, but I do know just from talking to everybody that all three of the like Hyundai Group SUVs, so the EV6, oh God, now I can't even remember them all because there's but like it's like the Genesis, the Hyundai, and the Kia all have kind of a version of the same SUV, and all three of them were popular and everybody liked them. And then there were a couple that were sort of unexpected, like BMW's electric SUV was really popular, and of course everybody liked the Lucid, everybody liked the Rivian,
right?
And then there were things where people liked them a lot, but because of pricing, it didn't feel like it would make sense for it to be kind of the number one pick. The Lightning is very cool, but it's it's very, very expensive, and it doesn't do like everything that a truck needs to do yet. I mean, it does, but just not for long. Towing with a electric truck is still inconvenient.
Not there yet.
And then there are things like the Hummer, where like half of us loved it and half of us hated it. I was actually not on the love side. Sorry.
Yeah, I could see that.
I was impressed by it, and it was hilarious to drive. But I feel like and in some ways it's going to do like the muscle car is for Dodge. It's a way to win over a group that is strongly anti-electric.
Sure.
But I do sort of feel like, come on, if we're talking about range and we're talking about like efficiency and the whole point of this is to kind of make a better world, if that is possible, through cars, maybe 9,000 pounds isn't the way to do it. That is 100% me working out some emotional problems that I have. You know, like I said, a lot of people on staff loved it, and it's a complicated issue if you start getting into the ethics and philosophy of why we're moving where we're going. You know, might make sense really for us all to be doing hybrid or hydrogen, but well, you know, that's for smarter people to figure out. I just want to do burnouts, and so
well, let me ask you. So, you know, being entrenched in the carburation world and the fuel injection world, and we're very lucky that we've experienced everything. We have, right? We've experienced it. We can still go out, you and I, and if somebody's like, well, we need a Model T to test, well, we can pretty much find one and get into one, right? So we've experienced the entire automotive spectrum. Is there anything about an EV, even the good ones, that you don't like? Sound aside, or lack of sound aside, is there anything that you go, this part of these electric cars, I just don't care for? Or do you feel like 100%. They're getting
okay? Would you like the list?
I do, actually. Yeah.
Okay. So mine, well, the number one complaint is charging network, and I will get back to that because it's long. My number two complaint is gimmicks.
Okay.
I feel like there's a really fine line between being innovative and charming and just changing things in a way that makes them less usable. And if you spend time with a bunch of EVs, the door handle, like, why is everybody reinventing the door handle? They're so confusing, like both inside and outside. They're just like, they're all complicated. Some of them aren't even that pretty. Like, I forgot what it was, the Cadillac, or maybe it was the Mach. Like one of them has like a multi-part process because the handle's up at the top, but the button's down at the bottom. It's so unnecessary. And like, I'm sure the designers had a wonderful time and they all thought they were very clever, but it just, like, don't do it. It would already work. Kind of like Shifter, right. Like when everyone went away from Prindle, and I was like, you know what was good about Prindle? Everything.
Right.
So I don't like the gimmicks, and I don't like when things are full screens because, and I mean, and this isn't just me being incompetent. Like, there's testing that's been done that buttons are easier for people to use.
Oh yeah, totally.
Faster, less distracting, and safer. So when everything is like deep into the screen menus, I find that inconvenient, and then you end up with just this big greasy screen in your car, and it's not as cool as it looks in the concept cars. But the number one problem is charging network. I don't know if you've done a road trip yet.
Nope.
In an EV.
Have not.
And
don't want to.
Everybody who's like pro EV will say, and rightfully so, that if you own one, you will have a charging station at your house, and you will just charge every night, and then you will go to work, and maybe you will charge at work. And that is true if you live in the suburbs and you work somewhere that has chargers at it, or charging stations at it. But if you live somewhere rural, if you live in an apartment in the city, if you don't have a parking space at your own house, you won't be able to charge in that way. I mean, and I never worked anywhere that had a dedicated parking spot for me, so I don't know all these people who get to charge at work. And if you get a Tesla, the charging network is very good.
Yes.
For the most part. If you do not have a Tesla, there's all these different companies, Electrify America and ChargePoint, like some other smaller brands. First of all, you got to do a lot of math. Like, you're like, well,
not happening.
This many,
no.
What's going in, and what is my car capable of taking in, and also what is the temperature, and how long is it going to take, and how far is it to the next stop? And is anything going to change in that time period that messes up my calculations? And what if one of them doesn't work, which is very often the case? And what if I get there and they're already plugged in by somebody else, which is often the case? And then there's also like a kind of like scavenger hunt feeling to finding the public chargers, because, a gas station, you don't even think about this. Gas stations, they're like embedded in your brain. Like you could recognize one a mile away, just like you could see the shape.
Yeah.
You can understand that looks like a corner that would
Yep.
have one. You know what
Right,
kind
right.
of off ramps are going to have them. You just
That's
know.
right. Right.
But with the electric charging stations, you don't have that. Like there, a lot of times they're in like maybe grocery stores or just a parking lot, and you kind of drive around like this Home Depot parking lot going like, okay, they're over there. Okay, I can see somebody's bolt over there. That's probably where it is, right? And so it's very, yeah, it's still like kind of got this adventure feeling to it, which, you know, I mean, is kind of fun, but not when you're in a hurry, you know.
Well, I was thinking about that during last week at Pebble Beach. Like from my house to get down to Pebble is basically 120 miles, right? So an EV, say 300 miles worth of range, right? Now you know how I drive, okay? We've
safely
done this.
And at the speed limit.
Right, unless I'm not driving and you're driving, in which case it's probably 85 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so, and I was like, well, all right, so I cruised down to Pebble at 80, 85 miles an hour. I got the AC on kill.
Theoretically and on a closed course.
On a closed course, right. I got the AC on kill because I'm a big person and I need my cold. I'm burning 150 miles, 160 miles worth of range. Okay. Then I get to Pebble and there are 9 million cars there. The anxiety would trip me up before I even left the house as to where I was going to charge that thing. And that's the thing that keeps me from dipping my toe into the water. It really, really does. And for most people, having that second car is still a relative luxury, right? You know, we're fortunate that we have a couple of cars that we can use, but I don't know, man. I feel like the hybrids, I'm all in, totally 100% in. A plug-in hybrid, beautiful. Thank you. And I've been asked to go on EV road trips. I just don't think I could deal with the anxiety. I think I'd lose it.
You'd be pretty stressed. I've been, you know, because you're a fan. Yeah. I mean, I live in constant chaos, so I kind of enjoy the like just danger of it all. But yeah, I mean, but the hybrids are great. Like, I mean, I just had the Chrysler minivan and it was so cool because I was like, fabulous. Oh, I could plug it in and like run my errands all on electric, or, you know, I can just put gas in it and take my friends out for a beach day. Pro minivan, by the way, if you're thinking about it, minivan over SUV. But yeah, there's a certain kind of personality I think that currently EVs are best for, and that is, you know, that is somebody who is not a spur of the moment road tripper. It's somebody who's got like an organized life schedule and is an organized person. You know, when people are like, "Well, you just plug it in at your house," I'm like, dude, okay, I have the phone with the biggest battery like capacity, and I often just don't plug it. I will often put it down on my desk next to the charging cord,
right,
and then I will not plug it in.
Yeah.
You know, what can I say? I'm a rebel.
Like, here's my charging cord that's not plugged in. My phone's right there.
Yeah, exactly. Same. So, you know, I'm not quite the right person. And I'm also the kind of person where, you know, I'd be on my way home and I'd be like, okay, well, it's fine. I'll have 15 miles of range left when I get home.
I can make it.
And then somebody would call me and be like, you gotta come over here. There's like 3 Opel GTs doing donuts and across town. I'll be like, I'll be right there. So, you know, I don't, you know, it's not quite the right jam for me at the moment. I mean, I think that it'll get figured out. You know, I mean, there's already companies that are, you know, working up to like 500 miles of range. Lucid's got 500. Yep. That's a lot. Like, I like that. That's a lot.
But I feel like for me, that 500 would equate to about 350.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can ask Ben Collins. He was doing laps at Seika, so we'll see what kind of range he got.
Well, I'll tell you, I think that, I think I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that my biggest concern is that charging network, the road trip network. Still, for a daily 100-mile commute round trip, fine, beautiful. I think
they should love it.
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
It would be really good for what she does. You know.
Oh yeah.
So I like going to gas stations, which I know is weird, but because sometimes you see cool cars there, and
Yeah,
it makes me
totally.
feel, it's like the thing in my life that makes me feel the most like a grown-up is going to the gas station. I don't know why. It's just something I associate with grown-ups, and I love doing it. But I do understand that most people do not, because they are dirty. Sometimes people say rude things to you, like you just want to get home. And so for those folks, I would say that you don't ever have to go to a gas station with an electric car, and people seem excited about that.
All right. All wonderfully fair points. All right. So I want
How
to,
balanced I am.
yeah, it's very good. Very good. You got the yin and the yang. Everybody's like, this is perfect. I do want to talk about, you actually wrote an article not that long ago, which I think people should go to at Car Driver. And it's about two cars that I like. It's the 2023 Nissan Z performance model, and I believe it was a 2021 Mustang Mach-E.
Yes.
Right. So you got turbocharged V6, naturally aspirated V8, right? Both sports cars, because the Mustang is still a sports car.
Yeah.
Right?
Both manual.
Both manual.
Yeah. Both rear-wheel drive.
Yeah, now, having owned a Mustang and having owned a Z way back in the day, I do have a soft spot for both. Give me your, people can go read the article in Car and Driver, but give me your top 3 points on each one.
Okay. I remember this. So it was part of a bigger comparison that we did, where it was like four sports cars that we had. So we also had the Supra and a BMW.
Okay.
And I believe either Mark Takahashi or Dan Edmonds, one of our many smart contributors, wrote the main article. And then we kind of pulled out these little dual comparisons. Yeah. And when they first were like, okay, you got to do the Mustang versus the Z, I was like, well, this is just not a fair fight. I mean, the Mustang was so much more expensive, and it was like so much more like, seemed like so much more of a complete package. But it ended up being a fun thing to compare. And here's why: because we went to breakfast with all four cars, and we were walking out and this guy was this is in Palm Springs-ish, I think. No, it was out further in the desert, and we're way out in the desert. This guy's coming out of this breakfast place. He's got like short, kind of like Bermuda shorts on and flip-flops. He's super tan and like, older. And he like looks over and he's like, I had a Z and a Mustang, And it was like, yeah, I get it. Like, these cars both are kind of playing off of the same sort of nostalgia, and in similar ways, because they're not like straight, retro cars. The design, design wise, right? They both have like kind of modern, like much more modern shapes, but then like clearly recognizable even to this guy in his Bermuda shorts in the desert. So it was, I liked them both. I think the Z needs a little more. I mean, the Mustang ahead of it. They've been working on the Mustang for a long time. They've kind of worked out exactly what that car needs to be, and the Z is brand new. Would a better comparison, or would you have rather compared the Mustang to the Supra? Do you think that would have been a fairer fight? Well, I think they did that too. I mean, the Mustang was pretty dominant, but so one thing that was challenging with it was there was no exact trim comparison, like matchups between the Z and the Mach, interesting, right? Because we had, did we say Mach-E earlier? Mach 1. Anyway, the Mach 1 is pretty much the most expensive Mustang you could get. That's not like a GT 500, right? Right. And but then if we had done a GT, that's like doesn't have the power that the Z has, isn't performance-y enough. So the Z is kind of in between those two Mustang trims. So that's and that's a thing that's truly constantly difficult with these comparisons. Is it's like the car companies are not being very thoughtful of us. They're not giving like facts, easy matchups. It should be like horsepower to horsepower, price to price, but I mean, I liked them both. I think that I was, I'm optimistic that the Z is going to work, you know, that they're going to have when they have a new version, that they'll work out some of the maybe like soft points in the current one.
Okay.
Have you driven it? Have you driven the
No,
new Z?
I have not driven the new Z yet. Was actually pretty excited about it. I am a Z fan. I do like them.
Yeah.
I mean,
Do you like the
I
look?
had yes. My favorite looking 300ZX was still the mid 90s one. Like a 300ZX twin turbo is still one of my favorite cars. I have been slowly scouring the internet for them, except they're already, I think, out of my price range, because clean ones are like 35 to 50 grand, which does make sense to me.
I like the is it the 10th anniversary one? The like 80s one that's black.
Oh, 84.
Yeah.
So I had an 84. I had a 1984 300ZX, and it was a great car. It, you know, abused it mercilessly until Mother Earth just reclaimed it by way of rust.
This
but
was
the
East Coast days, wasn't
this
it?
this was East Coast, yeah. But the 10th anniversary of that car was beautiful. Black, gold, full digital dash, manual, little tiny turbocharger, but a fun car. But yeah, the mid 90s one was always one. As for the new one, I think the styling is good. I don't think it's great. It reminds me way too much of a 370. And I think, to your point, it looks like it looks like it hasn't evolved yet to where it needs to. You know, so I'm hoping it does, because I'm actually quite excited about it. Like, it's a car that I would look at for a sports car as an alternative to, say, a Mustang or a Camaro or something like that, or a BMW. Yeah, I'm torn. I'm like 60-40 split on it. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those cars that has good angles and bad angles.
Yeah,
you know, which is fair. I also have good angles and bad angles. I mean, who am I to judge?
Well, I'm going to disagree with that. However, we have been running now. My God, it's been an hour. Wow, that's a quick hour.
How did we do that?
I don't know, but it's pretty impressive. We talked about Pebble. We talked about old Mercedes. We talked about a Dodge EV, Nissans. My God, Jesus, we really did come together. Even your Nova build. That's pretty impressive.
And Knight Rider.
All right. And obviously a Knight Rider. So where can everybody find the illustrious works of Elana? Everywhere on the internet, in every publication, on YouTube, the whole deal.
Well, for the most part these days, I am writing for Car and Driver magazine, which is still a print magazine if you would like a subscription. And we also have a lovely website and a YouTube channel. In fact, we do a semi-weekly YouTube show called Window Shop, where we get a challenge and we have to shop for a car and then fight it out. So I think your Hemmings folks will really enjoy that. You should be on it sometime, really.
I would love to.
You'd clean up. So you can find me everywhere where you can find Car and Driver. And then if you would like to follow my personal like ridiculousness, so Nova builds and turbo Transams, and just getting tickets on Highway 1. I mean, theoretically, that is Challenge Her on Instagram and Twitter and YouTube.
Wonderful. Well, and Elana, it is always a pleasure to talk to you, to see you, to go play, do fun car stuff. It's always amazing. With that, I think we're going to close it. But before I do, I'll throw this out to everybody, as they know, we are Hemmings. We have the largest classified out there with 20,000 cars online. If you want an old classic, if you want a newer car, anything, go to our website, check it out. Go to our auction, buy something. Come to our podcast, hit that subscribe button, and listen to wonderful people like Elana talk to me every week. Guys, Elana, men and women out there, great show. Miss you. I will see you soon. And everyone, thank you for tuning into the Hot Rod BBQ.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast and hit that subscribe button, and we'll come to you every week.